This here is another viewer's. We all know you said it in your heads. It's a broken gaming PC, who would have thought? And this one apparently turns on but doesn't send a signal to a monitor. The owner also mentioned 2 simultaneously lit debug LEDs during the post process for CPU and DRAM. He's also gone out of his way to troubleshoot what little he can on hand with the parts at his disposal. He said that the graphics card works in a different system. We'll verify that ourselves, of course, but just something to know going into it. He also said he tested DRAM in a different system, no problems there. He actually expects it's either a CPU or motherboard issue, which wouldn't be all that surprising considering the debug lights that are apparently illuminated, but usually my go-to for a no picture out scenario is the graphics card, so we'll be sure to rule that out fairly early on. It's also not every day we see an MATX build in the playlist. This is a nice change of pace. I love that we don't have a lot of empty space below the graphics card, perhaps one of my favorite things about this form factor here. And if you're curious about specs, he does have a B550 MATX motherboard in here paired with a 5600. It's a Ryzen 5 CPU, 6 cores, 12 threads, and an RTX 3060. There's also 16 gigs of DDR4 in here and a somewhat mysterious power supply. You know what, screw it. I'm curious at this point. Oh, okay. You know, I'm not gonna lie, even though I know this isn't the unit that exploded quite frequently, I still get a little nervous when I see gigabyte power supplies in systems. Let's jump into the deep end then with this one and see if we can't get it fixed. Are you ready? Stay with me. If you're planning your next PC build, then consider checking out our sponsor, VIP SCD Key. Their Windows 10 and 11 OEM keys sell for a fraction of retail and will unlock the full potential of your OS. They'll also remove those pesky activation watermarks. Click the links below to get started today, and be sure to use our special offer code SKGS for a sweet discount on a variety of options, including Windows 10 and 11, Pro and Home, and more. Hello there, and welcome to Fix or Flop. If you're new, just know that everything you see us do in this playlist is free of charge to the owners in question. We don't charge for labor or hardware or anything like that, and that's thanks to your viewership. We monetize videos like these on sites like YouTube. That's where we make our money, and we have great sponsors as well, great hardware supporters and Patreon supporters as well. You guys see your names at the ends of these videos. All of that is such a huge help. It's why we can do what we do, and I hope to continue this series for several more seasons. Our first order of business should be to power the system on and attempt to replicate the issue described by the owner. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. I'm gonna power on now. Okay, front fans aren't spinning. I'm not sure if part of that was because he was tinkering with things himself before he gave the system to me. We can eval that a bit later. Also hear an interesting, it's like a whirring sound, like there's scraping on one of the fans on the graphics card. It sounds like something's clipping this fan. I know it's the graphics card because we can stop it and the sound disappears, but there aren't any cables or anything in the way. It just clips by itself, so I'm not sure how much longer that's gonna last. The good thing is it spins at least for now. And on the post front, we got nothing. Also, sure enough, if we move some of these cables out of the way, you can see we do have 2 illuminated debug LEDs, one for CPU and one for DRAM. This might sound bad, but as a troubleshooter, I'm glad that what the owner described is lining up exactly with what we're seeing here. I am expecting this to be a hardware issue based on these symptoms, and I also expect we're gonna be probably testing a lot of different components in this rig. I don't normally like to jump straight to the motherboard and CPU, even though that's what the owner thinks is wrong here. I'm going to rule out some of the easier stuff first. I'm gonna start with RAM. Of course, its debug LED was lit, and just wanna make sure that these are fully seated. Of course, they are in the correct slots. I'm gonna remove these and replace them both with one known working stick. A trusty Vengeance LPX DIMM shouldn't hurt. Whoa, and what do you know? We actually get a post. It's loading into Windows. Looks like Windows 11 on this machine. I can't believe it was that simple. Is that seriously all this is gonna be? It's just a bad kit of RAM? God, I will say though, the graphics card fan is just awful sounding. I'm just gonna hold my mic next to the shroud so you can hear what I am hearing. It's pretty bad. Now we can't get ahead of ourselves. Just because we have a working system now that we've swapped out this kit, that doesn't inherently mean that this kit is bad. It could mean that we have a dead memory channel, in particular channel B. See, we only replaced a DIMM in slot A2, and the order is usually A1, A2, B1, B2 in a 4-slot board, with A2 and B2 being populated first. I'm gonna move this single DIMM here to slot B2 now, which I know is not the normal way of doing things, I just want to see if we can get a post with this second channel activated. I'm also curious because the owner said he tested his memory kit in a separate system without issue. And I don't normally take someone at their word when it comes to troubleshooting, but it is worth noting here. It's interesting that actually now we're not getting a picture out again. This is smelling like a dead memory channel. And sure enough, we are back to the 2 lit debug LEDs for CPU and DRAM. Now, in an interesting turn of events, I went through off camera and tested every single DIMM slot available on this board with our working module. Unfortunately, now we can't even get the system to post with a DIMM in the slot where it originally worked, in A2 only. It's a black screen back to CPU and debug LEDs illuminated. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why it's finicky. It worked literally 5 minutes ago. And now with a DIMM in the exact same slot, known working, it doesn't want to work. These inconsistencies drive me insane. Also, if you're wondering, yes, I have tried clearing the CMOS multiple times to no avail. I want to quickly remove this graphics card from the equation. I don't suspect it's the issue just based on the debug LEDs we're seeing, but in situations like this where we're not getting a picture out, it never hurts to at least inspect the graphics card. But even after swapping in our trusty GT1030, we still don't get a picture to our monitor, which tells me that his graphics card is probably okay. Now, we could take this a step further and test this in a known working platform. I don't see the need now currently, though. It just creates more work for us because the symptom is exactly the same on the PC side. Still 2 debug LEDs illuminated. I want to focus more of my efforts on this immediate issue first, and then once we've resolved it, hopefully we can resolve it, we'll put his graphics card back in, and if all is well, then we didn't need to test the graphics card anyway. His power supply also checks out, by the way, in case you were wondering, and again, no, this is not one of those units that randomly explodes. So here's the situation. Having tested virtually every other component in this build, I think it's time we shift focus to the platform. I do think the viewer was right. At this point especially, it looks like either the motherboard or the CPU is to blame. I'm erring on the side of the motherboard. Typically those go bad before CPUs do, although in this playlist, I have been shocked at the number of defective CPUs we've run into. And if I'm being honest, I'm getting real sick and tired of the system being as stubborn as it is. Oh, by the way, even with everything non-vital disconnected, so like that includes fan cables and things, I've got USBs disconnected, HD audio, I've even disconnected his M.2 here, although I didn't think that was to blame to begin with, we still have the 2 lit debug LEDs with no picture out. So I'm thinking it's gotta be either the CPU or the motherboard. How could it not be? We've got to remove the CPU to swap motherboards anyway, so I'm actually going to swap CPUs first. It's the easier of the two. I'm, again, erring on the side of this being a motherboard problem, but it would be nice to rule out another expensive component. There we are, CPU, don't be shy. Well, hold on. It's actually a 5600G. So it's an APU. The owner said it was only a 5600. I will say, at least physically, everything seems to check out. Back here, you'll see that we don't have any bent or missing pins, and the socket is also very clean. I don't have an exact replacement for his, but I do have a slight upgrade in a Ryzen 7 5700G on hand, so just a small core count bump. I'm gonna throw this into his rig and see if we can't get a post. The other thing I was thinking about is maybe we have a short, maybe around the back side of the motherboard. This is an MATX layout again that we're dealing with, and maybe there's a standoff in a location that there shouldn't be one. Easy does it then. I'm not gonna bother reinstalling a cooler either. We are just trying for a post. Let's see if this does anything. I know it's a big mess up here. Sorry, ignore that. Let's go ahead and power it up here. I'm not gonna obviously leave it on for too long, again, because we don't have a cooler on the chip. I'm also curious if the chip gets hot. The owner said that his chip was getting hot, so I wonder if we're gonna see that with this new CPU. Right, here we go then. It's powered up. 2 debug LEDs illuminated right away. Oh, but it's flashing through. Looks like it's training memory. It's reset itself a couple times, which is again much further than we've gotten as of late. All right, yep, chip is scorching. I don't want to leave it on much longer. Yep, there it was. Okay. All right, it's off now. So is that it then? Was it really a CPU problem? Sure enough though, the moment we put the original CPU back in, which you can see here now, it's a 5600G, we don't get a post and we go right back to those 2 lit debug LEDs. So with our upgrade, the 5700G back in, I'm gonna go ahead and thermal grizzly her up, and then I'm gonna reconnect all of his original components just to triple check that the CPU swap did actually fix it. And here we go. This is for all the marbles. All original components back in here. Save the CPU swap and upgrade. Let's see what happens. I still gotta fix the front fans. And for some reason, none of the fans are lit, even though they are RGB compatible. Maybe he's disabled them since they hook up to the motherboard, but I'll address that with him behind the scenes. Let's see here. Oh, actually, Front fans are spinning. Oh, interesting. I didn't think I reconnected. I just reconnected everything that was connected to begin with. I think it is training memory right now, and I'm just rambling, but I'm kind of nervous, to be honest with you. I'm hoping this works, because if it doesn't, I have to undo everything we just did. I kind of just went full beans into this, and then we'll have to swap the motherboard, which is like a last resort, because that involves basically disassembling an entire system. Come on now. You can hear the fans ramping up, spooling down. Like it sounds like it's restarting itself, training memory as per usual, and there it is. It wants to reset TPM because we swapped CPUs. That is a relief. You know, I was wondering why it kept loading into the BIOS, and that's because I forgot to reconnect his boot drive. Let's get this in here. I also find it interesting he secured a heatsink to this drive with some rubber bands. I mean, hey, it gets the job done, I guess. Looking for the swirly circle. There we go. Okay, cool. So it looks like it is loading now. I'm glad we didn't have to mess with any boot settings in the BIOS. And any minute now, here we go. All right, that's it. So we are in Windows, and what I'm gonna do off camera is reboot the system a few times just to make sure that everything is stable, make sure that it doesn't fail again. But I'm fairly confident at this point, his original CPU is defective. It looks like it's on its way out the door. Remember, one time we did get it to actually post with his original chip, but every other time we tried, it failed. So the last thing I wanna do with it is try connecting it to a separate system entirely. I don't want it to have anything to do with this rig here. We're gonna set up a known working platform, plop his chip inside of it, and see if we get a post. If we do, I'm gonna have some explaining to do. I know this is a bit of a mess. I like just throwing together test benches off the cuff for fix-or-flop videos like these, and I get asked quite a bit why I don't have a standardized test bench that I don't have to keep disassembling after every episode. And the answer is, well, no two systems are the same. Some use Intel, some use AMD, some use newer platforms, some use older platforms. I'd have to rebuild the test bench every episode, which is what I already do. Sure, I could recycle the power supply between rigs, but that's about the only component. I still have to remove the graphics card, disconnect all the power cables. It's a bit of a mess. That's why I just prefer makeshift setups like this. Alrighty, power supply flipped on. Let's try jumping the power pins, and we will see what happens. So right away, actually, interestingly enough, the CPU and DRAM LEDs are both lit. I wonder if it's gonna stay that way. Oh, it's okay. Wait, hold on, what? So it flipped quickly to the boot LED and then switched right back to CPU and DRAM. This is kind of jarring. Okay, and went back to boot, now back to CPU and DRAM, back to boot, oh, back to CPU and DRAM. Wait, no, is it posting now? It's posting now. What on earth is going on? What is it with problematic PCs this season that exhibit such inconsistent symptoms? You guys saw, with one exception, the owner's 5600G did not result in a post. We swapped it with our known working 5700G, we got a post. I even swapped them back just to be on the safe side. I swapped the owner's 5600G back into his platform like 2 minutes after that. Didn't put a cooler on or anything, and made sure that it didn't post. And in fact, it did not. Black screen, the same two lit debug LEDs for CPU and DRAM. That told me, okay, a CPU swap is warranted. We did that, the 5700G now works no problem in the owner's rig, but then we take the 5600G here and it works in a totally separate system. I seriously cannot handle the inconsistencies. It's so frustrating. I cannot explain it to any of you. I can't explain it to myself. I can't rationalize it in my own head. So how the heck could I convey any sort of like, yeah, here's my policy prescription. This is what I did to fix it. I have no idea what I did to fix this. I have no explanation for why the chip is working here when it wasn't working in the owner's rig. It was a CPU swap. That's it. It's the same cooler, the same storage drive. Everything else is the same. Sorry, had to take a chill pill. Sometimes I get a little too vulnerable with you guys. Maybe that's a good thing to an extent. I'm not sure. This approach I've always tried to keep as candid as possible. I don't want to hide anything from you. The mistakes that I make, the impressions that I have just off the cuff, sometimes they get the better of me. But I really hate the fact that I can't explain some of the things I've been seeing as of late in this playlist. It's just mind-boggling how a CPU could work perfectly fine in one rig and fail to post in another. They're both B550 M-ATX boards, they both natively support 5600Gs, at least the BIOS revisions that are on these boards. What other explanation do we have? The one thing I will say is that I initially tested this little makeshift rig with a DIMM in slot A2, which, if you recall, was the one instance where we were actually able to get his 5600G to work in the other motherboard as well. So I'm curious if I move this to, say, slot B1 or B2, if the system will still post. There's only one way to find out. If this works, we're just gonna call things here. We're gonna end the video. I'm not gonna pretend like I have any explanation for why we're seeing what we're seeing. We'll just say that we're happy that the rig works again and that the owner has a small upgrade to go along with it. Here we go, power on, jumping the power pins, and let's see what happens. So CPU and DRAM lights are illuminated. Now we're at the boot phase. Boot and VGA are lit. And there we go. That is another post. Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know. Thank you so much for watching this one. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give this one a thumbs up. That would be greatly appreciated. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about this. Again, I can't explain it. No clue what's going on. This is the second time this has happened in this season alone. Very frustrating, but the one positive takeaway here is that the owner system at least works. I have powered that on several times by this point, let it run, let it idle at Windows, no issues at all, whereas initially we couldn't even get the thing to post. That's great. The one thing I will bring up to the owner is that it sounds as though the graphics card fan is on its way out. Again, just a reminder what this sounds like. Yeah, not the most confidence-inspiring. What I will say though is that fans like these are not difficult to obtain per se. They usually originate from China or Taiwan, where the shrouds are manufactured. You can find them on sites like Alibaba, and they're only about $5 or $10 on average. The problem is it takes often several weeks for those shipments to arrive to places like the US. So I'm gonna tell the owner that I expect that fan is on its way out. You don't want it to die, because if it doesn't spin and you put a heavy load on the card will overheat or it'll throttle itself into oblivion. Your system will randomly shut down, or you'll get weird artifacting on screen, or at the very least, you'll see a huge performance drop. So the fan should probably be replaced sometime soon. It's not a difficult task, and again, it's not very expensive, so I'll point him in that direction. But that's about the only thing left to tackle with this rig. Otherwise, it's a very nice looking, more affordable MATX rig. I like the white case, it's got decent airflow, plenty of Lian Li fans in there, and well, it posts again. It loads into Windows. That's mission accomplished. Just let's forget about this stuff. My name is Greg. Thanks for learning with me.